Benjamin and William Henry.
Thought I'd get you with the double Harrison.
Carter Chambers is an intelligent family man who works as a mechanic. While working, he's engaged in a quiz with a coworker. He doesn't flinch in giving historical answers to every question thrown at him. As they progress with the quiz, Carter suddenly gets a call from the hospital, reporting about his current health condition. Edward Cole is a wealthy and successful businessman who built a billion-dollar business from scratch. He is in a board meeting enjoying his special beverage coffee. Beside Edward is a young man named Richard, who is a representative from Edward's company. With the board chairman urging for a response, Richard steps to the podium and gives a summary of a proposal that other people in the board meeting seem to disagree with. The proposal is opposing the motion that patients, under no circumstance, should be assigned a single room to themselves. 2 beds to a room with no exceptions, or so he says. Since most public healthcare centers have been privatized over the years, that gives Edward a stand in the laws that govern the facilities. Just as Edward stands to prove his point, he gets a cold and coughs into his handkerchief.
Are you all right?
It's blood. Edward knows that this is big trouble for him. He's never been sick before and had no reason to ever visit the hospital. Thomas, Edward's assistant, goes into the hospital room to prepare ahead of his boss. He slides open the curtain and is surprised to see a man, Carter, in the same room assigned to Edward. Edward arrives at the ward and is upset at the fact that he has to share a room with someone else, forgetting that he was the one who set the rules for his hospital in the first place, giving no room for any exception. Edward undergoes a major surgery. It turns out the cancer had spread out to other parts of his body. After the surgery, Edward continues to take his sleeping time quite seriously. On the other hand, Carter's wife, Virginia, pays a visit. She tries to lift her husband's spirit in whichever way she can. She shares news of their daughter's achievements, and this makes Carter happy. He is proud of his daughter. Virginia finally takes her leave with a heavy heart, hoping her husband would survive the phase he is in.
How you feeling? Double question.
The next morning, Edward's doctor comes to examine him. He sounds responsive after the surgery. The doctor informs him about his blood level. Carter wants to get his attention, requesting an examination. The doctor ignores him, saying he is not assigned to work for him. He promises to get Carter's doctor. Thomas brings an expensive meal for his boss later in the evening. He offers Carter, who politely declines, questioning if Edward really wants to eat that much. Edward ignores Carter's warning, savoring the taste of his delicious meal. At the end of the day, he ends up in the toilet, throwing up all of his meals. As both men are in the same stage of their illness, they end up sharing similar symptoms and experiences. Over time, they begin to grow fond of each other.
She's an outstanding violinist.
They discuss family and other aspects of their lives. Edward, who had been married 4 times, could not decide if he wanted to be single or married. Carter, a full family man who has been married for 45 years, had to quit his dreams of being a professor in history and take up the job as a mechanic to fend for his growing children. He's lived in this demise and never had a true taste of life. Along the line, Carter decides to write down a bucket list with the hope that he will be able to achieve everything on the list. Edward tries to find out what Carter is writing, but Carter dismisses him, saying it's nothing serious. Edward's test results come in. He only has 6 months to a year to live. This news saddens him. He tells the doctor to attend to Carter's needs. Carter also makes an inquiry on how much time he has to live. His results come in. It is similar to that of Edward's. After hearing this, Carter takes his bucket list note and squeezes it out, giving up hope. The next day, Thomas visits Edward at the hospital. His heart is heavy as he asks Edward what he is to do when he passes away. Edward gives Thomas a reply that suits his question. While Thomas is trying to clear up the environment, he picks up a squeezed note on the floor to trash. Edward requests for the note and reads through it. It contains a listed item of things Carter wishes to do before he dies. Carter is displeased that Edward has access to the list.
What is this? Come on, give it back.
He explains to Edward that it was something he was taught back then to do before actually kicking the bucket. He dismisses the idea of ever going along with any of the listed wishes. He also doesn't have the funds and the heart to do so. Edward thinks Carter's wish list is boring and void of fun. Edward picks a pen and begins to add more fun ideas to the list. As it turns out, Edward does have the funds and the heart his new friend lacks. Carter laughs upon seeing his friend's wishes. He feels it's a bit too extreme for their age. Edward suggests that they have all the fun in the world with the little time left. He finds it hard swaying Carter, but with a few words of his and a few good points, Carter agrees. Just then, Virginia walks in, and Edward excuses himself so that they can talk. She hasn't heard about the news on Carter's health. She's greatly disturbed when she figures it out and tries to book an appointment with a different hospital. Edward tells her that it doesn't matter the hospital's specialty. What's bound to happen would happen anyway. He chips in his plans with Edward to disappear for some time. She's not pleased with their ideas. She thinks Carter should be fighting for his chance to survive, or at least spend the last few moments on Earth with the people he loves. She walks out on him, feeling angry and pained. First off, they go skydiving. Carter has never been on a plane before, and now he's going to surprisingly jump out of one. Carter is so scared he pulls the cord before they hit the drop zone, and so does Edward. Luckily, they're alive after that. While they're at the port, Carter discovers that Thomas's real name is actually Matthew, a name Edward finds too biblical. Next, they go to get a tattoo, but Carter politely declines, leaving Edward to have his tattoo. With their small talks, Edward discovers that his friend has only been with one woman his entire life. He suggests that they add that to their list. Carter again declines. They move on to having a car race, where Carter gets to drive his favorite ride, a vintage Shelby car, off to another country. And it turns out Edward doesn't plan on maintaining his chastity, even with death on the line. He feels it's medicine for the body. The two bask in their fantasies about the world. They share their religious beliefs. Edward isn't much of a believer. He's fully aware that he doesn't need persuasion. They move over to France, the city of love, enjoying a pleasant meal. Carter questions the wealth of his friend. Edward isn't a fan of discussing his wealth with people. They talk, and Carter finds out his friend has a daughter. Edward strongly objects to bringing her up on the radar of their discussion. Suddenly, Carter leaves the table and hastily walks off to the bathroom. There's a great amount of blood stain on his shirt. Edward wants them to leave for the hospital, but Carter insists that it's nothing to be worried about. They head back to their lodge. Thomas has fully booked their rides to other cities of the world. Edward likes to think his assistant is irreplaceable, but he shakes it off, admitting that to be a lie. While Carter showers upstairs, Virginia calls Edward. She harshly demands that he lets her husband come back to his family.
Maybe we should put this on hold for a while.
Come on. Now I told you, stop worrying. I'm fine.
Edward then tries to talk his friend out of the rest of the trip, but Carter is determined to finish what he has started. They go through Africa, explore the wildlife, shoot guns, and climb the pyramids of Egypt. As they engage in more conversations, Carter throws a question at his friend based on an old Egyptian belief. He seems so interested in knowing if his friend has ever found joy through the course of his life. Edward's complacency pushes Carter to urge him more. Edward then gives a past experience he shared with his daughter, Emily. He was a father that was very much involved in the life of his daughter. After she goes to college, she joins a charity organization. Then, she meets a guy she falls in love with and marries him, despite Edward's dislike toward the guy. This act causes a separation between Edward and Emily. Her husband hits her the first time, and Emily tells Edward and pleads he doesn't get involved. As the act becomes frequent, Edward decides to take care of things without the knowledge of his daughter. She gets really upset and wishes for her father's death. Edward admits that he did wrong things, but never once did he regret any. They talk about plans and burial arrangements after death. Carter wants to be cremated after death, his ashes placed inside a can and buried somewhere cold. They visit China, riding a bike through the Great Wall. They move to Mount Everest, one of Carter's dream goals. But there's a great storm. Thomas informs them that they can only afford to explore the mountain during spring. They'd be dead by then. They're back at a restaurant. Carter is suddenly approached by a lady, Angelica. They talk casually about the wonders at the top of the mountain. After that, she plainly admits to having a room upstairs, just in case he needed to ease himself. He declines as he tells her he is married. Carter realizes that Edward is the one behind the setup. While driving home from Los Angeles, the car diverges to another route. Edward is concerned. They park in front of a house, and he realizes it's his daughter's. Edward becomes upset and rudely questions his friend for teaming up with his assistant.
Your idea, Tom?
No, it was my idea. I talked him into it.
He hasn't been in contact with his daughter for years, and as far as he's concerned, Carter has no business intruding on his personal matters. He speaks of how Carter doesn't know a thing about him and that his seemingly short trip couldn't change who he is as a person. He walks out on his friend and rides off, leaving Thomas behind as well. Carter heads to his home. Shockingly, Virginia welcomes him home with open arms. They hold a family feast with his children and grandchildren. Carter expresses more affection towards his wife. On the other hand, Edward is home reminiscing on his last few moments with his friend, feels lonely and disinterested in his previous lifestyle. Back at Carter's, while enjoying a moment with his wife, he falls into a seizure. Edward is informed. He rushes to the hospital. Carter will be operated on soon. Carter and Edward have a brief talk. Carter gives Edward a note to read about his special beverage. He makes an annoying discovery, and they both burst into laughter immediately till they cry. Carter ticks off an item on their list and hands the list over to his friend. Edward must now make it a one-man mission to finish every item on the bucket list. In his weak form, Carter encourages Edward to find joy in his life. Edward makes amends with his daughter, Emily. He meets his granddaughter. In a heartbreaking moment, Carter passes away, leaving his family and Edward devastated by the loss. The atmosphere is emotionally charged, emphasizing the impact of their friendship and the profound effect Carter had on Edward's life. Edward dies later on, and Thomas buries both ashes in a can somewhere on Mount Everest, taking out the list of doing something majestic.